Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Unhindered Faith. Thank you again for joining us this week for another episode of Unhindered Faith as we are diving into the story of Daniel in the lion's den. And I've changed the title of this. This is a message that I spoke a few years ago, and the Lord has just kind of brought it back within me, and it's been stirring within me. And so I've revamped it and just letting God speak to me honestly each week as it's really just coming to life, and I'm seeing more and more in this story of Daniel and the lion's den. We started last week just kind of highlighting where we're going with this, but the question that we're asking is, why am I still in the lion's den? Why am I in the lion's den? And I've changed the title, and we always know the story of Daniel in the lion's den is Daniel in the lion's den. I like to kind of take a step back sometimes in scripture and look at a different lens. And really, what I've changed in this is it wasn't Daniel in the lion's den, but as soon as Daniel entered the lion's den, it was the lions in Daniel's den. It was the lions in Daniel's den. And we know this because the only thing that changed in the lion's den were what? It was the lions. Last week, if you did not watch last week, I would encourage you to go into last week's video, part 1 of this. We kind of walked through Daniel chapter 6 verses 1, actually the whole chapter realistically. We just kind of walked through the history, but we're going to talk about today one of the truths that we will find in this story, and asking the question, why am I still in the lion's den? One of the truths that is revealed is when we are facing the tests and trials or life situations that we go through, we realize that test reveals the depths of our human limitations. Test reveals the depths of our human limitations. You see, in Daniel chapter 6, there's 3 things that happens to Daniel. Daniel is facing the greatest challenge that he has ever faced in his life. It's one of those challenges that it was humanly impossible for Daniel to escape from. You see, King Darius, because of the decree that was laid out, King Darius was stuck in the law of that day that he had to throw his trusted friend Daniel into the lion's den. And we know this, there's 3 factors that play into this. Number 1, the law of that day is that when the king made a decree, which he did by making the nobles tricked King Darius by making a decree that no one can worship anything or anyone except for King Darius. And by doing so, it trapped Daniel because Daniel was not going to worship King Darius. He was only going to worship his God and the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, which then forced King Darius, no matter what he can do, he had to throw Daniel in the lion's den, because the law of that day was that even the king, the most powerful man in the land, could not reverse his own decree. So that was number 1. One of the main factors that limited Daniel's human and King Darius's human capabilities, the limitations, was that the law limited Daniel ever being rescued. The most powerful man of the kingdom, the king himself, could not save Daniel. The second is, as soon as Daniel was thrown into the lion's den, there was a large stone that was rolled over onto the opening of the den. What does that mean? It means that no matter what, Daniel climbing out, he could not remove that stone. Daniel himself could not rescue him. I don't know about you, but for me, when I start facing life situations, the first thing I do is start processing. How can I get myself out of this situation? And there are times in this life that the most powerful person on this earth can't save you, and you can't save you. You are in that situation and you see no way out. There's a third factor that played into this, which brought the human limitation, which was this. King Darius used his ring and made a seal over the stone with the nobles. That meant that there was no outside help. Not friends, family, nobody else on the outside could remove that stone, because if it did, then those individuals that helped Daniel escape and get out of the lion's den was now going to be in the lion's den with Daniel. So we find ourselves in Daniel chapter 6. Daniel is in the greatest test of his life, and he's in a situation. As soon as he's thrown into the lion's den, he realizes right away there is no way out of that situation. I don't know about you, but if you've ever been in a situation like that, you start to get into a desperate mode. Anxiety starts to rise. You start spinning, right? In fact, Celebrate Recovery, sweatshirt that I'm wearing, they talk about in those moments that we start spinning, and we need people from the outside to help us understand what's going on. There is something in this story that is absolutely amazing. Is when Daniel was in the lion's den, he discovered the power of God. He saw the power of God transform the atmosphere in that room, in that den. Let me just encourage you. The lion's den that you are in, it now switches to your den if you have a relationship with Jesus in your life. Because it's in those moments, in that power and the authority, the lions, which scripture talks about, the enemy prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking to those to devour. And the enemy is prowling around like a roaring lion. Those lions in the lion's den that day were hungry. They were starved. They were ready to devour anything that entered into their territory. But when Daniel entered into that territory, and I think as soon as he entered, he was thrown in before he even hit the foundation of that den, the atmosphere of that room changed. And it became Daniel's den because God reigned within Daniel. Daniel was trusted by King Darius, and he was faithful to his God. He trusted in God. We'll talk about that next week and how important that is in our situations. But today, I want us to realize we may be in a situation in our life. We may be walking through a lion's den, but this is an opportunity for us in the relationships that we have formed in the King Darius's in our lives, for those moments that we walk through and experience, for those King Darius's eyes to open to God. Because we see, what did King Darius say? King Darius, before he threw Daniel into the lion's den, he said, Daniel, may your God save you. That means that Daniel and King Darius had conversations about Daniel's God. And in this moment, King Darius, who did not believe in God, started to believe in the prophet Daniel and the God that he served, and said, Daniel, if your God is real, may he save you. That night, he didn't ask for any entertainment. He didn't ask for anything. He was in his room. He could not sleep. He could not rest. All he could think about was King Daniel, his trusted friend, his trusted friend that was in the lion's den. I'm sure he was pacing back and forth. I'm sure in that moment, he was saying things like, God, if you are real, Daniel's God, if you are real, man, may you save Daniel. I would need my trusted friend in my life next to me. And he was the first one. As soon as the sun rose, I'm sure before the sun rose, he left his room, he left his palace, and he ran to the opening of the lion's den. And he called out to Daniel, Daniel, are you there? And Daniel's first words was, O King, may you live forever. My God has saved me. My God has saved me. And there was no wounds on him. There was no scars. The power of God shut the mouths of the lions, which means at one point when Daniel was in the lion's den, those mouths were open. You may be watching this today, and the lions that are prowling around you, mouths are open. Let me encourage you with the power and the authority that God has and has established within us as believers. If we trust in God, those mouths of the lions will shut. So why are we in the lion's den? Because there's a truth that is revealed to us. And that truth is test reveals the depths of our human limitations. And it's the King Darius's that has never experienced the power of God in their lives that can watch the power of God unfold in the lion's den that you're facing. They will see the lion's den, but by the end of it, they'll see that those lions were actually in your den because of the God who reigns in your life. That's how we have unhindered faith.